Hello and welcome to MotorInc First. Today we're going to be talking about Pulsar. Oh, Pulsar. Which Pulsar? We will allow our experts, Mr. Marmar, to
Every
explain.
weekend, a new Pulsar. I love it.
Okay, at the simplest level, this is the flagship, right?
Like I asked in the NS200 MotorInc First, I don't know what Bajaj's flagship is.
Okay, at the end of this discussion, we'll know whether it's the flagship or not.
No, in the end of the discussion, you tell us if you think this is the flagship, because honestly, I mean, I'll be honest with you. We normally ride bikes for about 200 to 250 kilometers for every MotorInc First. I've ridden this motorcycle about 160 kilometers. You've ridden the motorcycle for what, 20, 25 kilometers? And honestly, I'm not feeling like reaching for the keys of this motorcycle. Is my level of interest in this motorcycle? We'll discuss it in detail. So as far as I'm concerned, there is no planet in the known universe where this could be the flagship for any Bajaj brand line. Okay, but I'm thinking this motorcycle still has to discover what it really stands for.
He sneaked something in there.
I think it's fairly obvious, right? Right?
You know, I was also going to start this one off by saying, you know, the last time we spoke about Pulsars and Shumi was had ridden the NS200, and you know how he was fizzing, and I was doing a flashback about how I was fizzing about it when we first rode it, and now we've gone to the N250 and we've started with that.
Okay, so let's quickly get a recap of what Kartik remembers of the previous N250.
Oh God.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so one of the things I remember was at that point in time, few small things which in terms of finish and all I did not like.
Okay.
There were certain bits which had like there was a little ding in all the plastics of around the headlamps around. Back then they fixed it then, and now they have a
cover
cladding
over it,
now on this one. What I did not like back then was the chassis. Like somehow I did not feel connected to the motorcycle. It would do stuff, but it never felt like a flagship worthy motorcycle. It did not feel like a motorcycle that was talking a language to me. It felt like it was doing several things at the same time, which as a rider is too much chatter. So it was a motorcycle you rode and you said the engine, yes, it has that Pulsar trait to it, which is great. Okay, that gruntiness and all of that, with enough at the top as well.
Correct.
But the chassis just didn't do anything for me. Yeah.
So when I rode the N250, my first thinking was there is no way that this motorcycle can replace the 220F at all, because the 220F to me was the motorcycle where the 220 was incidental. The fastest Indian was incidental. It was technologically, in size, in appeal, in desirability, the top of the class.
Correct.
And if Bajaj has to do top of the class to replace the 220F today, then they cannot be playing the 250, 220cc game. It has to be a larger motorcycle. If they had done this a year and a half ago, and that was a 400cc motorcycle, there was a logical way to think about it. Today, there are lots of very good 400 out there. So is the NS400, which should have been able to do this a year ago automatically almost, be able to do it when it comes out in May? We'll have to see. But if it was an NS500 instead, that was coming out in May, there was the opportunity for Bajaj to recapture the idea of the 220F again.
Okay. What's changed on the N250?
What has changed? So first, let's quickly summarize what happened with the N250 and the F250.
Okay.
The F250 disappeared. Yeah, the F250 disappeared completely. I think it was only in production for a few months before the sales dwindled basically to zero, to the point where Bajaj said there's no point trying this out, so it's shut. I don't know whether it will return or not. I think there is a logical reason why it should come back.
And what is that?
A faired motorcycle in a 250cc class makes sense to me.
But if the company itself could
But if it looks like a Discover when it comes out, then nobody's going to buy it, because you do want a sense of size and premiumness to be associated with it, which I don't think the F250 was in any way capable of doing. But remember that the F had the more comfortable riding position because it had the taller handlebar and all of that. It was actually the logical motorcycle to have brought to your house instead of this naked N250 in some ways.
So the F,
I think, failed because of the styling more than anything else. It just looked too small, too meek. And remember, we were crossing Airoli Bridge together one day in the evening, and we both thought it was a Discover until we recognized it as an F250 later. I think that's the core of the issue. The N250 has also not done very well. This, I would think about it as a bug fix. And what Bajaj is doing is they've not raised the price a lot, but they're trying to raise the value quotient a lot. There are pros to this, but there is also one fairly serious con in there, and we'll come to the con. But what they've done is they have put upside down forks onto the Pulsar now, so value gone up one notch. The digital console has also come to the N250, which would be a huge story, except that it has come to everything simultaneously.
It's
so
the exact same cluster from the...
Slightly different in the sense there are more electronics on the N than the NS. So more things switch on and say other things on this console.
Oh, really?
But the fundamental layout and all of that remains the same. So if you think the NS's rev counter was too small to be read, so is the ends. If you think that the fuel gauge and the rev counter sitting on the left edge have too many similarities and it takes you a while to recognize that, yes, you have still the same problem. So the fundamental issue with this console is that it's a bit cluttered. The fonts are a little bit small. You do get used to it. It's not a crisis. But I think the big problem is they tried to fit it into the same space as the last one. And so everything's crunched into this space and it looks not so great because of it. Functionally, it's fine.
I think the readability aspect, like you were saying, I don't think the genuine issue is, I think there's too much happening in very little space.
Yeah.
So sure, I mean, on the one hand, you could say that, in some time you'll get used to it, but is it going to feel great at any point in time? No,
it's not a great user experience for sure. So that's one change was USD folks.
Right.
One change is this console. Third is they've added a lot of electronics to this motorcycle, and some of it is interesting. We'll talk about it. So this has traction control.
Okay.
Remember, it's not ride by wire, but it has traction control, which is interesting.
Oh, really?
Yeah. They've got 3 riding modes, which are technically ABS modes, not riding modes. You've got road, you've got rain, and you've got off-road. There is a fundamental good idea in there. It's an insight that I think a lot of manufacturers would do well to also incorporate. The example that Bajaj gave at the presentation was also spot on, which explained the idea of that mode. We'll talk about it in detail. But apart from this, it's a CNG update, color and graphics. So it's a much brighter set of colors. There's more stickering going on, and none of the body panels have changed. And the issue that we had brought up earlier was that there are too many N series pulsars that look the same. The only difference is now you get the white N250, which actually looks quite nice with gray and blue graphics. You get the red one that you'll see in the pictures in our story. And there is, I think, a black one. And 2 of them have golden USD forks, and 1 of them has black USD
no
forks.
change to tire sizes or anything?
100, it's now 110. If it was a 130, 140, I'll put up the sizes, but the tires are one size larger. That's one of the sources of the con. We'll talk about that.
Okay. So now where do we go from here?
Now we go to the fact that the engine is the same as before, and it's a really nice engine to use. It's pretty smooth. Is it as smooth as possible? No, but it is smooth enough. You will not complain. It was always designed to produce a lot of torque, which it still does. So this is a really simple motorcycle to ride. Out on the highway, it doesn't feel as robust as an NS200 in the sense of the NS200 is coming into the performance when the N250 is leaving its performance behind a little bit. But competent highway bike, absolutely yes. Is the performance very different from the NS200 in total quantum of performance? Not too much. But in the city, significantly easier and very, very, very commuter-like.
If I may, since we're doing this back and forth between the N and the NS, what's the difference in power? Do you remember?
They're both 25 bhp motorcycles.
They're both.
But the N makes more torque using its larger engine for torque. And that's the whole point of the N. What Bajaj went and did this time is, instead of remembering what the Pulsar was supposed to be, they allow the NS to be those Pulsars. And the N is a hardcore commuter. Okay, if there was a TV channel on which the N250 should feature regularly, that should be the Discovery channel. And this is a running theme. We'll come back to it. And I'm not very happy about where this N has reached.
We're talking about a Pulsar. That's a great commuter.
Effectively, yes. Right? And Bajaj did have a brand that did that. Let's see if you can discover that in the comments. Okay, so the point is, I really enjoyed riding it in the city, but in a non-engaged sort of way. So if you ride your motorcycle where you're not really an enthusiast, you just need a thing to get around, the N250 actually does a really good job of being a 250cc commuter in that mode. You don't pay much attention to it. It doesn't give you much feedback or reward, but it gets you there. It's reasonably comfortable. It'll have great fuel economy. This is a higher quality Pulsar than before. So when you compare it to the NS200 over a 2-year, 3-year, 5-year period, I think the N250 will last better. All of those attributes do accrue to the N250 for sure. But does that, in my head, make it a Pulsar? it's a weak proposition, to be sure. Okay. The side that I don't enjoy so much about this motorcycle is the suspension. Okay. You have to remember that the previous N250 suspension was designed for comfort. It was a reasonably soft motorcycle, if you remember. This motorcycle is also soft, but they've not retuned the rear shock. They've put in the front USDs, which increase the weight by 2 kilos roughly. The rear wheel is 1 step larger, but none of the suspension has been retuned significantly. Wheelbase is 7 millimeters shorter and the offset has been brought in. The strange thing is Bajaj says offset is reduced, but the trail is the same, which makes no sense to me, but okay, whatever. What happens, I think, is that the N250 had a very narrow sweet spot, which it occupied really well, and it felt very, very nice. Now I think this motorcycle has fallen just outside the sweet spot. So I kept thinking that this is a slightly weird motorcycle, not uncomfortable, not sporty for sure, but slightly odd. Okay. So at very low speeds over all kinds of roads, it felt reasonably good. But as soon as you started to pick up the pace, that feedback from the motorcycle about that connection that you have, it just started to ebb farther and farther away. And on the same stretch of the expressway, remember on the NS200, I had such a great time.
Right.
Empty roads again on the N250, afternoon again, hot day, same, almost identical conditions. I did not feel like pushing the N250 after the first 2 corners because it just felt weird. Not weird in the sense of unsafe, but weird in the sense of the bike is not designed to do this. It is not having a good time. There is no point trying it.
And this is not at some serious speeds.
No,
right?
This is on the highway. How fast can you go in? It's on concrete. It's a slippery place. It's a slippery place with lots of bumps. So suspension has to do quite a lot of heavy lifting. The NS was on it.
Right.
The N250 just was not. So I hung off, and you can immediately start feeling that the springs are almost at the point of bottoming. I jumped 1 speed breaker just to make sure this was not just a feeling. The NS lands and continues.
Right.
The N250 lands and hits the bump stops. Right? It's so much softer. But the NS's suspension today, I think, is a better setup as a sporty setup than the N250 suspension as a comfortable setup. Okay, now I'll give you an example.
You know what we're saying right now, right?
I'll give you an example.
We're talking about a 12-year-old motorcycle.
If I were to do the NS200 View today, I would call it the best Pulsar on sale today. And you know why I'm saying this to you, right? So I have no doubt in my mind that the NS200 is a more cohesive Pulsar than the N250 is a cohesive Pulsar today. Bajaj, I would tell you, you need to look at the suspension settings again. Okay, there is something that has fallen out of whack in the change of the wheel size, in the change of the wheelbase, in the removal of the offset, in the addition of the USD fork. Something has fallen out of whack and it needs to be brought back into whack, because the previous one was genuinely a comfortable, competent motorcycle. Okay, I'm surprised, in fact, that nobody else has brought this up in their stories.
Okay. Is the other front forks from like the Dominar or something?
They're saying that it is built for this motorcycle. These are 33mm forks.
33.
It has been set up to replicate the settings that were on the right side up forks for the previous N250, apart from the weight change, apart from the offset change, apart from the wheelbase change and the heavier wheel at the back and stuff. But it's supposed to replicate the same setup. I'm just saying it hasn't happened. Okay, when it comes for test, let's raise the preload and make it a much stiffer setting and see what happens. Maybe it'll improve the bike and that will give us a direction to go in. But if you're going to ride this bike very gently around everywhere, you will be fine. The faster you intend to ride the bike, the more I think the N250 will not feel great.
Right.
All the other parts work. Okay, so it's still, the brakes are still nice. It's still reasonably good over the bumps at reasonable speeds. Yeah. You can go touring on the motorcycle. The bike doesn't suffer on the highway. Fuel economy is excellent. Higher quality levels are visible. Bluetooth connectivity, turn by turn, all of this is, if it's important to you, it's not. If it's important to you, it's here. I mean, you can use it. There is an app, etc., etc. So all of those parts work. What are you laughing at?
Nothing. The Bluetooth bit. Because I could never make sense of why would you want this? Like, you know, we even have those headsets.
Yeah.
Mine is switched off most of the time.
Mine is always on.
Mine is always switched off.
Mine is always on so that I can say, hey, listen, I'm riding a bike, I'll call you back. Or if it's really important, somebody from the office needs something, in which case, okay, hang on, I'm on the bike, let me park. And then I don't have to take off the helmet to have a conversation.
Only time I have it on is when we're riding like together. Right? Then like, okay, just quick message like that. Otherwise, it's off. So anyways, yeah. I went for a short spin because he asked me to. And the thing that I feel about this bike is, and it feels like the bike has become more reactive. And so as long as you're upright, you're okay, you're fine. So like when you're doing normal stuff, it's fine. It's when you start leaning the bike over, and it could be because the tire profile is, I mean, it's wider, right? So it's just getting more inputs and it's not being able to handle well, which is why that sense of disconnection and all is happening. Like even I felt like every time you tried to lean it over, it's like it's slapping you up, like, hey, just nudge it back up a bit. It's not quite happy doing all of that. So yeah,
you're absolutely right, and that's why I've not enjoyed riding it. I can see why a commuter would like this bike, but therefore, can this bike replace the 220F in any known universe?
But is the 220F available now?
Yeah, very much.
Wasn't it discontinued?
Bajaj does what customers tell them to do. There is no curation going on in Bajaj in terms of the product line. This time, I was very happy to note that after the NS200 MotorInc First, where we said how many Pulsars, what is going on, there was an A3 sheet of sales distribution across every state, across every Pulsar, to show me that there is localized traction for each of the 10 or whatever number of Pulsars there is, enough to justify them being in production and being sent to those places.
This is the future, man, because they're doing custom manufacturing for each need in every little pocket.
Which is one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is
amazing.
The other way to look at it is, Apple once said there is no point asking customers what they will want in their next phone, because Apple knows what will happen in technology terms 5 years from now, but the customers simply do not.
Right.
And this is, to me, the same thing that's going on with the Pulsar line. Remember that these are not people who are experienced motorcyclists. They are coming up the motorcycle ladder, and whatever they've bought last is the largest part of their biggest motorcycle experience. That's all they know. So if you ask a Pulsar 150 owner what they think a 400 should look like, honestly, they have no frame of reference. How can they answer that question? So it is up to the manufacturer to curate the product line, to define what their brand stands for. What kind of customers would they like to have? And I don't think the answer to what kind of customers would you like to have in the very near future, I don't think the right answer will be all of them. I think the all of them is behind us now. What are you laughing at?
Correct. I mean, like, yeah, you should be able to go with one product which everybody can buy into.
Whether it is 1, 2 or 3, I don't think is the big issue here. The issue is, what does it represent for your brand, right? If I'm saying this Pulsar feels like a Discover, that Pulsar feels like a Dominar, this Pulsar feels like the Pulsar from 12 years ago.
Which Pulsar feels like the Dominar?
I'm saying if
we don't want that.
Yeah, if each motorcycle sort of feels, if each motorcycle sort of reminds you of some other brand within your brand kitty, then what is the identity of that brand itself?
No, I completely
right.
agree.
When NS came out, N and S stood for Naked Sports, right? What does the N stand for?
Nothing.
I don't know.
Nothing.
Nothing 250.
Nothing 250.
And foreclosed 250, which is retired. No.
Can I?
Yeah.
Just take the same example that Shumi started with, the 220F. Why did the 220F become an icon? As Bajaj did back then, that massive fighting spirit. They punched way above anybody's expectations when they created the 220F, right? With that, that vertically stacked headlamp, projector, back then, to see all of that.
Yeah.
A 220cc motorcycle when everybody was doing 180 at the most.
Correct.
Right? They went to 220, they got fuel injection. I think they got ABS back then with front and rear disc brakes.
Yeah.
So like, they gave you the works.
Yeah.
Was it the best motorcycle in terms of handling and performance? No, but it was a great package. It got you excited about going up close to the motorcycle, right? And whereas when the F and the N came out, the first thought was, no, the
desirability quotient went missing completely.
Yeah. And you look at the same thing when they did the NS200 or the 200NS, whatever it was at the start. They came with liquid cooling, 4 valves, all this performance, which is why today a 200cc bike is still producing as much as this 250 because of the difference in technology, right? So they are delivering the power in different ways, but they went out and created this package which was ultra modern, and which is why today, 12 years later, we're still finding it
at least relevant. Yeah, at least relevant. In fact, there's one similarity between the 220F and the N250. When you push the 220F around a racetrack, for example, there'd be a certain point in performance beyond which the chassis would just stop performing completely. The N250 has the exact same point at which the chassis just says, okay, I cannot do more than this.
Yeah. I would not ride this like super hard for sure.
Okay, so we've done the whole circle now. I just want to discuss their ABS and traction control because it is interesting. The ABS modes are actually quite simple. you double tap the mode button. Remember the M button from the NS200 that did nothing?
Right.
So on this bike, it does change the ABS modes.
Okay.
So you double tap them, close throttle, and it will change between road mode, rain mode, and off-road mode.
Okay.
Obviously, rain mode is most intrusive. Road mode is your normal. Off-road mode is very interesting. The example they gave is, let's say you're going uphill in relatively loose conditions. You're not off-roading. It's just how India is.
Correct.
If you stall your motorcycle in these situations, if you stop your motorcycle in these situations, it can get complicated because the electronics won't let you do many things. It is for those situations that they created this relatively relaxed mode. So it will allow you to lock up your rear wheel, for example. You don't turn off the rear ABS. But if you're in off-road ABS mode, you can turn traction control off if you choose to. But it will by default allow you to spin the wheel. And the interventions when it starts to intervene are much slower than the other two modes. So if you need to spin your wheel to get out of a situation like this off-road mode will permit you to do it. I wish they hadn't called it off-road mode because it paints the wrong picture because how we associate the idea of off-road mode. But I think fundamentally it's a good idea. The technicality of, oh, I got stuck, now I need to switch the mode and all of this, I don't know whether most riders will have the presence of mind to do it until they learn to do it.
But I didn't get this. Like, let's say I'm going uphill.
Yeah.
It's loose surface.
Yeah.
I come to a standstill.
Yeah.
How does the off-road mode help me?
So no. On the way out, you can switch off traction control in off-road mode and allow the wheel to spin to get out.
Off-road mode is still okay. Has
one.
Okay.
Two, when you're trying to slow down, it does let you lock up the rear wheel.
Okay. Okay.
It doesn't immediately intervene and say, hey, what the hell, you're trying to lock up the rear wheel. No.
Fine.
You lock it. It's okay. Then the intervention will come. And they've designed the intervention to come a lot slower than in the other two modes. So it will continue to spin a little bit and give you more support. So both going and stopping, it's clever. Traction control, you have to remember to switch off. Okay. And I said,
but in off-road mode, the traction control settings are also changing.
No, it's one traction control. It's on or off. Off is only available in off-road mode.
Only in off-road mode.
You can only switch on off-road mode if you're below 18 or 20 kilometers per hour. If you're going higher than this, you cannot enter this mode at all. So it's very much a trouble mode. As opposed to, we'll go off-roading with our N250. No, if you're in trouble, there are electronics that will support you getting out of trouble.
Interesting.
Which is very interesting.
Interesting.
Okay, and the presentation said exactly this. That if you had a motorcycle with normal ABS and normal traction control going uphill, going downhill, off-road, in the dust effectively, not off-road, and you get stuck, electronics can sometimes interfere and make it difficult for you to get off.
I can just imagine one of those typical Maharashtrian state roads with gravel on them and it's steep.
Correct.
Yeah.
So in those situations, there are two electronic things that will help you get out of that situation. I think job done. I think the labeling could have been better. So it is a more, it's a more accurate term that sets expectations rather than off-road. But yeah, okay, I understand what they've done. Okay. The traction control is interesting because there is no ride-by-wire, but they still managed to get traction control.
Oh, how?
They immediately connected me to somebody at Bosch, which was very cool. And the Bosch guy, I think Shreyans is his name. Thank you so much. That was a great phone call. He explained that with ride-by-wire, you have three inputs that you can use. The throttle, the engine spark map, and the fuel map. You have these three ways to control how to play with traction. You remove the throttle input when you take ride-by-wire off the table. But you still have to. You can still control the spark and you can still cut the fuel. So that's what they're doing. The primary way to achieve traction control is cutting the spark. And when that doesn't happen, or that doesn't work quick enough, then they bring in the fuel cut as well and do traction control. Honestly, I didn't trigger it enough for me to tell you it's great or not. But what I've read about it seems it is smooth enough. The interesting thing he told me is, if you wanted to build the same system for a much faster bike without traction, without ride-by-wire, then you would be in trouble. Because then the traction control would feel like it is working too slowly and therefore interrupting your flow. So to him, the way I understood what he said, this person from Bosch, is 250cc should be about the limit of where you would be able to go, have traction control and no ride-by-wire and still think of it as a good system. You wouldn't go beyond this. So if the NS400 has traction control, it should have ride-by-wire. If it doesn't have ride-by-wire and has traction control, then based on this conversation, it will probably be a crude feeling traction control. We'll see.
Understood.
Yeah. But do you need traction control in the 250cc class on a gentle commuter style motorcycle? In the rains, maybe it'll help. On an everyday basis, unless you're a terrible rider, it shouldn't help. If you're a terrible rider and it protects you from harm, fair enough.
Wet roads, I think it would be helpful.
Wet roads, it would be helpful. Yeah, and not that I remember this being a super slippery bike and spinning up too easily or anything, but okay, it's a safety system that doesn't get in your way, so we are okay.
Correct.
It's coming to you at the more or less same price as the N250 used to be before. Again, I have nothing to complain about in this front.
Yeah, I think it's torquey enough, and I don't know how good those tires really are, but overall I think it gives us sense of having a safety.
Yeah, it's a safety net. It's fine.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Prices, how much have they actually changed?
I think this is more expensive by 1,000 rupees or 1,500 rupees or something. It's not
really
a massive change in
nominal.
price. Yeah. Again, remember they're trying to raise the value quotient. If that comes with an increase in price, then they've basically shot themselves in the foot again. So
fair enough. 1,000 is negligible.
Yeah, it's a very small price rise. So we are okay.
Okay.
That's the story of the motorcycle.
So the question was, we started off with, is the N250 the flagship?
Before you answer that, hey, you can't avoid the quick summary, okay?
Oh, I have to do the quick summary.
Of course.
Okay. Okay.
3, 2, 1. Here's Karthik's quick summary. Please do remember to rate it after you finish watching the quick summary.
So the Bajaj Pulsar N250 is the flagship of the family in terms of displacement and price. Is it the flagship or not? I think you're going to tell us, but we're going to tell you what the bike is now with the updates. By and large, it is an idea to make this a better value proposition. So what they've done is hike the prices very marginally, as Shumi just said, about 1,000 rupees. And for that, what you're actually getting is better hardware by way of upside down forks. You have a wider tire at the rear, the exact size we'll put up somewhere in the video. And the other hardware is more or less the same. The slight change in the steering geometry. It also is heavier by 2 kilos because of the tire change, the front forks, all of that. You now have a new digital instrument cluster which also has Bluetooth connectivity and more electronic, just feedback, I guess, lights and stuff. Aside from that, you have the mode button, which we'd also seen on the NS, which is used here to switch between 3 modes, which is rain, road, and off-road. Off-road is slightly poorly labeled. It could have a better name. It has good utility. It can only be engaged under 18 kilometers an hour or thereabouts. And basically what it does is allow a more relaxed form of ABS. Correct. Yes. So that you can get some slip if needed. It will be helpful when coming to a stop. On loose surfaces, it'll also help you accelerate a little bit better. On those loose surfaces, this is the only mode in which you can switch off traction control. Yes, it has traction control, which we did not discuss. It's not lean sensitive, of course. There's no IMU.
There's no IMU.
This is very
no ride by wire, no IMU, no chance.
Correct. So none of that. Yeah, it doesn't have ride by wire. So doing this system is clever. They've used the electronics the best way they can to offer it without ride by wire. And Shumi said that he hasn't really used it that much, so can't say how fluid or smooth it is, but by and large, it should be good. And then the engine, it's been the best bit about the 250s since they came out, because it's got that old Pulsar grunty feel to it. It feels like this slightly raw machine, which is ever ready to go ahead, but with more performance on top. And that continues on this update as well. It feels just the same. So there's no difference there. In the way it rides, it is still a comfortable, easy motorcycle for everyday kind of usage. The suspension is comfortable enough. It's easy enough. The engine is punchy enough. It's fuel efficient enough. So all of that. It's just that when you start thinking of it as a Pulsar and want to ride in a more youthful or
Pulsary manner.
Pulsar, yeah, actually, that's a good one. Pulsary manner. That's where the disconnect feels more apparent now. I would say this might be my bias, but that was a shortcoming of the Pulsar N250 and F250 when they even came out. They just don't feel that willing to, be thrown around and be ridden fast. They want you to take a step back.
Yeah.
And that feels even more the case now with this, because there's just a bit more firmness from the suspension, maybe in terms of the way it's going over bumpy surfaces. It feels reactive. So it's not a motorcycle that you immediately get onto and say, hey, I want to ride this hard and fast, which is something we felt with the NS200, which was here right before this.
Yep. That's a good summary. Yep.
Which also is a 25 horsepower motorcycle like the N250, but a different character, but a more rewarding motorcycle to ride.
Yep. That's a great summary. So, in some, again, very short episode because there's not a lot to discuss here. Do you like these colors and graphics? Tell us in the comments.
Yeah, please do, because I'm not convinced.
Yeah, so when this red came into the office, everybody's reaction was, oh, that's an interesting red, more than, wow, that looks better.
The graphics didn't do it for me. The color was okay. It felt something like that classic red of the
Correct.
Pulsar.
Yeah.
But the graphics felt
yeah, sort of. Yeah, okay, whatever. Right? Yeah.
like they're kind of getting in the way, sort of.
Yeah. So no, they're trying it because remember, Bajaj will now deploy this design, this hard design, like this.
Wait. Sorry, I missed a very important point in the summary. You have to discover whether this is a Pulsar and you have to discover whether it's deserving of the flagship name of the Pulsar family, or does it deserve to be in another family altogether.
Yeah, so I think my issue with this bike is that it's not exciting enough for me to think of it as a Pulsar in my head. Right? Like I want to say Pulsar NS250, like I want to say Pulsar NS200. This bike I want to call N250. I don't think the Pulsar name adds any value or association or brand identity to what this motorcycle is able to do.
Dude, I'm not kidding. As you said that, I just switched it to D250.
Yeah.
Like Discover 250.
Yeah. You're done, no?
I'm sorted.
Yeah.
I'm sorted.
I think the expectation setting is better if you think about it as a Discover than a Pulsar, which is a huge problem for Bajaj.
It just works.
Yeah. So I don't think the N250 did well so far. And I don't think this value update is going to change that by much, unfortunately.
But if you are looking at the N250, right, the NS200 as well.
Yeah, or collect money and wait for the NS400 to come. We've said this before in other contexts, but a bike approaching 40 bhp is a bike that does a lot of what your dream is about. And then you can do that for a long time before you have the money to get to something much larger. So if you're on the way there and you're thinking that now I can get a 200 or a 250cc motorcycle, if you have a big dream, wait, have a little bit more patience, ride whatever it is that you're riding and stretch and see if you can get a 40 bhp-ish bike. That's the level of performance where highway touring, riding in the city, light off-road, whatever these challenges that you're dreaming about, they just become easy. And it's a very sweet spot. I'm not going to say a 70 bhp bike is as flexible as a 40, but in Indian conditions, what we do outside every day, 40 is a great number to aim for.
Wow, it's actually, I think, 80% of the job done.
Yeah. And if again, to give you my example, my 43 bhp bike still does so much that I can't get rid of it. Although I now have 270 bhp bikes in my garage too. And I get to ride everything that's new. But that 140 bhp bike still has a very, very reserved and versatile place in my garage. And it will always be like that.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to figure out where you should dream at, the first stopping point should be at something around 40 bhp. You'll do okay after that. After that, you have time. That bike will not get in your way. You'll have time to think about what to do next. It's great. Right? Is there anything else you'd like to add before we close off the Discover
that's a lovely point.
Pulsar N250 discussion?
What?
So I fumbled. Maybe we'll edit this out. I'm discovering that my English is not as good as it used to be. I get kind of confused when the bikes don't excite me.
And certain words tend to be repeated a lot. Then
I don't know why that word is stuck in my head. Maybe it was what I was watching last night.
Discovery Channel.
Yeah, about hyenas being hunted by lions or something.
Hyenas is being hunted.
Hyenas.
Okay, sorry, we're digressing.
You don't have to hunt hyenesses; they're not selling.
Anyways,
I didn't do anything.
It's my foot. My gun, okay. Anyways, yeah. So that
would be a lot more appropriate if you said, "I'm Hermes. Those are my wings that I just shot off." Okay, sorry, but that's way too much imagery. I think we are now fully digressing.
Yeah. So this is the second Pulsar we've spoken of in the last couple of weeks, and honestly, very happy to visit them because even today, the Pulsar name for us, at least, we started off as motorcyclists and with exciting, accessible performance motorcycles with Pulsars, right?
Yep.
And they have come a long way from where they started off. There were massive issues with quality, reliability, just regular, basic functioning aspects. And where they are at today, we don't talk about those things. So there's been a massive journey, but somewhere the essence of the Pulsar has got diluted. And we are still hoping that this is not where the story ends for the Pulsars, and with the NS.
Yeah. He's not doing it on purpose. Okay, I promise. He's not doing it on purpose.
And
N250.
No.
What do you think?
Which is the next one?
NS400.
So that is the NS. Yeah, that is the NS. Yeah. So hopefully when the NS400 comes, what our expectations were of the N250 will be fulfilled, or at least to a greater extent.
I'm not crossing my fingers, but that episode should be sometime in May, because that's when the NS400 comes up.
Awesome. So if you have any more questions, do let us know in the comments. Shumi will be sure to get back to you. And if you want to catch this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts,
And Amazon.
the links are in the description. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you so much.